pain here in my throat will only get worse until the ritual is complete. And he's not going to spill her blood prematurely, so I reckon she's still alive. As long as my throat is sore, I reckon she's still alive." Caroline exhaled shakily. "If it weren't for the jinx on that forest, I'd go after her right now, even if it was a suicide mission. But even with an army, we'd never be able to find his house when he's got that spell over the place." She felt tears stinging at the back of her eyes. She fought them away. The mother wants her vengeance, and she can control our fates. Old Sam wants to complete his ritual, and we have no way to get to him. Jane's voice was raw as she spoke. "We may have to accept that we've lost." Caroline swallowed a lump in her throat. She had already tried pleading with the mother directly, hoping to mitigate her rage, but it had only seemed to make things worse. She couldn't help the feeling that it was all on her. If she'd been better, if she'd been a better leader, more responsible with the power she'd been handed, maybe they wouldn't be doomed now. The two women lapsed into heavy silence, their footsteps echoing in the gloom. The corridor sloped downward, each step taking them closer to the servants' quarters. But then, as they rounded the final corner, they nearly bumped into Josiah. He looked dumbfounded, as if he'd seen a ghost. He parted his lips as if he wanted to say something, but no sound emerged. A faint shiver rippled through Caroline's body. Something about Josiah's expression chilled her to the core. She looked to Jane, who seemed equally concerned. "Josiah," she said, stepping close. "What's wrong?" Josiah took a breath and was about to answer Caroline when a terrorized shriek fractured the silence. It erupted from inside the servants' quarters. Caroline's heart sank. She recognized that shriek anywhere. It was Willie's. Caroline, Josiah, and Jane lunged through the door into the servants' quarters. When they entered the room, Willie was upright in bed. He was heaving wet, choking gasps. His skin had gone the color of sour milk. There were beads of sweat glistening along his forehead. He flung an arm forward, swiping at something unseen, curling his fingers like claws. "Get your decrepit hands off me, you old sack of shit!" he screamed, jumping out of bed. His voice cracked on the last word, pitched with feral outrage. It was the kind of anger that came from fear, raw and defensive, the fight-or-flight reflex of a desperate and terrified man. And Caroline knew exactly who Willie was screaming at. It was his grandfather. It had to be. Willie was trapped in the same nightmare that had been chasing him since childhood. The one he only talked about with trusted friends, and only in the comfort of daylight. Willie's knees buckled, and he collapsed to the ground, catching himself on the nightstand. Jane was at his side that instant, crouched on her knees. He turned toward her, wild-eyed, as if he wanted to say something. Then he went limp in Jane's arms. She caught his head before it hit the floor. Panting desperately, her hands skated over by his face, his arms, and against his chest. Her fingers found his throat, checking for a pulse. Then, she stopped fussing, a stillness taking over her that started with her breath. Caroline watched Jane's shoulders rise and fall, like she was trying to steady herself. Her face drained of color. "He's dying," she whispered. A thick silence settled over the room. Caroline barely registered the words. The world around her began to warp, tightening and distorting. Her heartbeat started thumping like a dull hammer in her skull. And then, from out of nowhere, they came back. A whisper, slithering between the gaps in Caroline's perception. A rustling hum like silk threading through bone. "Take him to Mill's Edge." The whisper coiled around her skull, slipping into the soft crevices of her brain, weaving through her breath. Her fingers twitched. "Leave the boy behind." It wasn't her own voice. It wasn't even a voice at all. It was an old chorus, deeper than matter, woven into the marrow of reality. The spiders. They were back. Caroline turned, reaching for a hoodie Willie had slung over a chair. She yanked it over her head, stuffed her hair completely into the hood, her body moving with mechanical precision and sudden confidence. "We have to take him to Kane Hospital." The words left her mouth before she even thought about them. It was as if they weren't her own words. God, she had missed this. Josiah's head snapped up, his face unreadable, but his stance had shifted, like he was suddenly on alert. Jane flinched like she'd been slapped. "What?" she stammered. Caroline knelt beside Willie's body on the other side of Jane, preparing to haul him upright. "We need to go. Now." Josiah stepped forward, clenching his fist. "Caroline, what the fuck are you talking about? You just got out of there. If they catch you, they'll lock you back up." "I know, but—" "Don't be an idiot. Let me take him," Jane insisted. "The spiders told me to go." The words landed like a blade between the three of them. Josiah closed his mouth, and Jane finally stopped studying Willie long enough to glance up. Caroline swallowed, her pulse slowing. "They told me to take him to Mill's Edge." Even as she spoke, the whispers were still there, all around her, inside her skin, skittering in the space between each breath. "Take him to Mill's Edge. Leave the boy behind." Caroline glanced over at Josiah. "They also told me to leave you behind." "Shit," Josiah breathed. Jane's fingers tightened around Willie's arm. Caroline saw the way her lip trembled, the way her body shook ever so slightly. She had never seen Jane this attached to Willie before. She had never known the woman to care for him. Was there something between them Caroline didn't know about? Josiah swallowed, glancing toward Willie's limp body. "Caroline?" He let out a breath reluctantly. "You really think this is the only way?" Caroline nodded once. Josiah exhaled, popping his knuckles. "Shit. But you better not get caught." Jane's eyes darted toward Caroline, toward Josiah, and then back to Willie. Her lip trembled. "We don't have a choice," Caroline said, feeling Jane's unease. "All right then," Jane swallowed. "We have to save him. We have to try." As Jane maneuvered the car through the winding streets leading to Kane Hospital, the engine's low hum was the only sound. Caroline sat beside her, drenched in shadow, occasionally casting a glance at the rearview mirror to see Willie lying unconscious in the back, his breathing faint and uneven. The view of Mill's Edge outside the window was transforming as they approached the hospital. The once neglected area now boasted modern facades, a stark contrast to the many decaying structures that still dotted the landscape. It was like watching a grotesque patchwork of progress consume the place. Kane Hospital stood in the center of it all, the main attraction of this odd sort of gentrification. What was once a humble community hospital was now a bustling hub of medical excellence, heralded by some as the Mayo Clinic of the East Coast. Billboards boasting groundbreaking research and innovative treatments lined the roads, overshadowing the quaint charm that was once found at Mill's Edge. Nearby, the Kane Shopping Center could even be found, a gleaming complex of glass and steel, meant to celebrate the medical achievements of the area. The Epcot-esque boutiques and gourmet cafes of the shopping center were the most grotesque homage imaginable to a healthcare system that was slowly rotting with commercialism at its core. Neither Jane nor Caroline spoke as they drove. Jane wanted to let out a scream, but she kept quiet. When they approached the hospital, the imposing structure of the urgent care unit loomed overhead, and Caroline pulled her hood down further over her face, meagerly trying to keep herself disguised. But her hands wrung together nervously. Caroline nodded after a moment for her to continue. "Well, you know, back when I was just a young girl, the Spiritualist Society was led by Samuel Calloway, Zachariah Loomridge, and William Ashburyist, and my mother and I joined because we were desperate to learn how to conduct a seance. My father, he had passed unexpectedly. Jane paused, the memories taking her away from the hospital for a moment. I was drawn to Zachariah Loomridge instantly. I fell head over heels in love with the man. But he was a man of the cloth and, well, he was also gay, so he was off the table for me, I'm afraid. But Samuel Calloway, though I was never drawn to, I'm proud to say. He had a darkness that frightened me. But he wanted me, especially at that young age. Her voice faltered. And of course I lost it to him when he tried to use me to summon hell on earth or whatever it is. I still wish I could offer more clarity in terms of what he's trying to do with his child rape ritual. Jane let this phrase fly off her tongue a bit too loudly, and she glanced around the room to make sure no one had heard. But anyway, a few years passed, Jane said with a fainter voice, and William Ashbury the Sioux. Bill, he found out what had happened. He felt pity for me, tried to show me how it's really done, tried to show me that it isn't always bad. But by then, I was already a fucked up little thing, and though he thought he was helping it, only pushed me further toward Tramp City, if you know what I mean. I was too young, and then I was a too young mother. I'm a shitty person, I guess. Suddenly, Jane felt a wave of comfort. Caroline was wrapping her in an embrace. It lasted several moments, after which Jane thought it best to finish her story. When William Muss, Zachariah, and Magdalena made the blood oath, I was there, lurking in the background. Jane grinned. I wasn't ever really on the inside of their pack, but I wanted to swear myself to protect the town. To protect my son. If they had let me make the oath, I would have. A long moment passed. Caroline's brow furrowed. She seemed to be absorbing every word with a grave intensity before she spoke again. Yes, Caroline? Magdalena died because the blood in her talisman was spent while she was still living. Is that correct? Yes. But what would have happened if Magdalena had died before the blood had run out? The inquiry struck a nerve in Jane, a fear she had long harbored but never voiced. Well, that's what I've been wondering too. William Ashbury, I was buried with his talisman, and Zachariah's. Who knows where it ended up? If ever the town was in grave enough peril, Jane stopped. She was suddenly horror-struck. The blood oath, the talismans. She stammered. Yes, Caroline nodded. What about them? Jane felt a cold dread settle around her heart. The mother of the spiders, she sent us here on purpose. Jane whispered. Willie? He's going to die. The headstone seemed to shift each time Helen glanced away, as though they were alive in the peripheral corners of her vision. A chill wind rattled the sparse branches overhead, the soft click of twigs colliding like bones. Her eyes searched the inscriptions on each headstone she passed, but none bore Robert's name. It was maddening. The letters carved into the rock were almost impossible to make out in the dark. Yet she had known she had to come here tonight. She could feel him beckoning her. Get it together, crazy-ass bitch, she murmured to herself. She could hear the tremor in her voice, the waver of unease that no amount of bravado could mask. You can't have lost track of his grave already. You just put him in the ground a few days ago. Except she had lost track. Each shadow bled into the next, and she could swear that when she turned around, headstones she just passed seemed to vanish entirely. More than once, she stopped, scrubbing a hand over her eyes, convinced that her mind was playing tricks on her. Or maybe it was the creeping exhaustion from nights without proper sleep. Her grief had kept her from resting. She hesitated near a tall statue of an angel, with half its face broken off. The wing on the statue's right side was cracked and riddled with spider webs. Helen's stomach twisted at the sight of the webs. She felt an itch, an uneasy feeling of being watched, even though the graveyard seemed deserted. An uneasy prickle ran up her spine, as if eyes peered at her from behind every little fucking headstone. Then something crawled across her foot. She froze. Slowly she looked down, her heart hammering so loudly that it pounded in her ears. A spider, fat and dark, scrambled over her feet before dropping to the ground. She suppressed a shriek, stepping back with a jerk of revulsion. The spider scurried off into the gloom as if summoned by some silent call. Helen's palms were clammy and she hastily wiped them on her skirt. "A spider," she muttered under her breath, trying to keep a lid on the panic welling up inside her. "It's just a spider." But she had the distinct feeling that the spider that had crawled over her foot was one among many. She pressed on, cutting across a narrow row she was certain she'd never seen before. These gravestones looked older, some toppled by erosion or centuries of neglect. But then, just ahead rose something large and imposing. The Ashbury Mausoleum. Looming taller than any tombstone, the mausoleum was made of weathered marble, its facade carved with Gothic arches. A pair of columns flanked the entrance, their capitals adorned with gargoyle-like faces. For some reason, Helen's stomach clenched at the sight. She tried to swallow, her throat dry. She took a step back, intending to go around, when she heard it. "Willie." The voice was a raspy whisper, painful and wet like a windpipe clogged with phlegm. It came from somewhere near the mausoleum entrance, echoing off the stone. Helen's entire body locked up, her heart thumping so violently that it almost drowned out the voice. She squinted the best she possibly could, but the moonlight was blocked by a faint cloud and had made the graveyard darker than it was before. She couldn't see anyone. The cemetery looked empty, aside from the gnarled trees and watchful statues. "Willie, you've come." A wave of nausea rolled through Helen. She opened her mouth to speak but had to stop to steady her jittery breath first. My name is Helen." Her voice sounded too loud in the hush of the graveyard, reflecting back to her with a hollow echo. "Who the fuck are you?" She had tried to inject some bravery into her tone and failed. The dread leaked through, plain as day, silence. Then another whispering chant, "Willie, so many years I've waited." Helen shook her head, disoriented. She felt spider legs brushing her ankles again, though maybe it was just her imagination this time. The clouds around the moon lifted, and the light cast dancing shapes across the ground. Helen yelped at this and stepped back, trying not to trip over the slanted edge of a broken tombstone. "Just knock it the fuck off," she hissed, whether to the invisible presence or her own imagination she wasn't sure. "Whoever you are, whatever is happening, just stop." That was when she noticed movement at the mausoleum door. The heavy, iron-banded slab stood partially ajar. She was pretty fucking sure it wasn't supposed to be open. A creaking moan broke the tense silence as the door extended outward, an agonizingly slow motion that scraped stone on stone. She wanted to run, but terror pinned her in place, her heart slamming in her chest. Then a face slid around the corner of the door, a face that looked more like a rotting mask than a human visage. Flashes of gaunt cheekbones showed through patches of peeling skin, and where there should have been eyes, sunken hollows watched her with unnerving delight. The mouth was a ragged slash of blackened flesh that twisted upward in a grotesque smile. Helen's blood turned to ice. Every nerve in her body fired off, telling her to get the fuck away. She couldn't hear anything but her own pulse, a thudding drumbeat in her ears. The figure's lips moved, revealing glimpses of discolored, rotting teeth. Around the ghoul's neck gleamed a strange medallion, a pentagram. In the center was a diamond skull that appeared to be filled with blood. The creature spoke, "Willie, you've come." Ivy was half conscious as Coop eased her out of the truck's passenger seat. The old pickup creaked as she tried to stand. Her legs threatened to buckle, but Coop helped her to keep from falling. Her entire body ached, every muscle heavy, every breath tight with pain. The venom. The spiders. Coop braced her with an arm around her waist, the other gripping her shoulder. "Easy," he said. But easy wasn't possible when her blood felt like acid, and each heartbeat spread more burning poison through her veins. He had brought Ivy back to Loomridge Haven. "Fuck," she hissed under her breath, swallowing a wave of nausea. An oily sickness churned in her stomach, threatening to spill if she opened her mouth too wide. "I'm not going to throw up in front of him right now. I'm not gonna fucking do that." She clenched her jaw and forced herself upright. Coop's grip tightened, steadying her. She hated him for saving her. She hated the shame that came from hating him. But she couldn't afford to muster the energy for anything like gratitude. Not when she was already fighting back the desire to just let herself fucking die for the way she'd left to go on another bender with some random asshole. That same random asshole was now nothing more than Spider Chow. She blinked hard, trying to banish the image of his corpse. "You did that to him." A voice in her head snarled. "You're the reason that poor dude is dead. You're the reason he became a casualty in this nightmare. If you'd stayed put, she'd be alive and ignorant of killer spiders from another realm or whatever the fuck." In spite of herself, she clung to Coop's jacket. It was either that, or fall to the ground and never get up. "Can you walk?" Coop asked. His tone was clipped, neither gentle nor unkind. Just businesslike, as though efficiency was all that kept him from panicking. "I don't know," she replied honestly. The world kept spinning, and she felt the venom like a surge of needles radiating out from her shoulder wound. "Try," he commanded, guiding her forward. The truck door stood open behind them, but she could barely think straight enough to close it. Each step reverberated pain through her entire body. "I probably look like a fucking newborn deer," she thought bitterly as she limped forward, leaning more into Coop, biting down on her lower lip until she tasted blood. The mansion's silhouette grew as they approached. A single window on the second floor was glowing with a faint light. The rest of Loomridge Haven lay in silent gloom. She didn't want to be here. The group was scattered, Leslie captive or worse, the mother of spiders furious at their failure, and the rest of them barely hanging on. "We let her down," she thought, shivering. She recalled the old legends, that the Weaver demanded respect, and they had pissed her off. It's only a matter of time before she devours us all. So maybe it's good that I'm getting my demise over with now. She swallowed the knot of despair in her throat. Coop pulled a key from his pocket, which Ivy figured he must have borrowed from the Loomridges when he came to get her. "You got this. Just keep moving," he prodded, working the key into the rusted lock on the side entrance of the mansion. Once inside, they hobbled toward the servants' quarters. Ivy allowed herself to focus on the physical pain, knowing that if she allowed her mind to drift, the venom would lull her into unconsciousness. Still, self-loathing twisted tighter and tighter in her gut until it became a heavy and monstrous knot. "You always need rescuing," the nasty inner monologue continued. "Always. From your vices, from the spiders, from your own fucking stupidity." She flashed back to the stranger's face. The guy she'd lured away with promises of a good time, only to lead him into a lethal den of terror. "You don't deserve rescue. That poor man should have been saved, not you. He didn't do anything but show up at the wrong place at the wrong time. And you had to drag him out of the bar like some reckless whore who can't handle her own demons." Her foot dragged and she tripped, and Coop tightened his hold, pulling her upright before she hit the floor. The hall smelled of stale air and wax. The tiled floor was cracked, the wallpaper peeling. "Watch your step," Coop muttered. We're almost to the quarters. Maybe we can find something to slow the venom. Doubtful, she thought. She could sense her circulation faltering. Light flickered around the edges of her vision with every beat of her heart. Just fucking kill me, she nearly said aloud. Why was she even fighting? As if reading her mind, Coop gave her a rough shake. Stay with me. Don't you dare give up. Don't lecture me, she managed, though her words came out in a breathy rasp. She tried not to sob. This is so fucking pathetic. Coop was practically carrying her. Her eyes slid to his face for a moment. Lines of worry etched his features, his jaw set in grim determination. He should be saving someone else, she thought. Someone who hasn't fucked up over and over. A wave of longing washed through her, longing for oblivion. Maybe dying here, letting the venom do its job, was the right call. At least then no one else would have to save my sorry ass again. Pain rattled her bones, and the flicker at the edges of her vision thickened. I can't stand this, she whispered, voice breaking. I can't stand that I'm so fucking weak. She felt Coop's gaze, but he said nothing. Maybe he had no words left to comfort her. Or maybe he agreed. They reached the quarters and went to the main lounge. A small, cramped room with a battered table and two mismatched chairs. A metal cabinet stood in one corner, its doors hanging off the hinges. Coop guided her toward a table. Sit, he ordered softly. Her leg buckled, and she half collapsed onto the chair, biting back a cry when catching herself jarred her bite wound on her shoulder. A trickle of sweat rolled down her temple. She was feverish. That's the venom, she reminded herself. You don't have much time, Ivy. She clenched her fists, nails digging into her palms in a vain attempt to ground herself. What if I don't care? What if I just let it take me? Her self-hatred warred with her self-preservation, and the war was making her dizzy. Coop rummaged in the metal cabinet, shifting cans and bottles with a clatter. I might find bandages or something, he said, though he didn't sound hopeful. Ivy coughed, a sharp, hacking sound that rattled her lungs. The venom's burn doubled down, and she had to squeeze her eyes shut to avoid fainting. The edges of her vision darkened, her senses tunneling. This is so fucking stupid, she spat under her breath. If I'd just stayed put. If I'd just not been such a fucking coward. Coop glanced over his shoulder. You're awake at least, he said, but the statement was flat. He returned to rummaging through the cabinet. She let out a bitter laugh that threatened to turn into sobs. Awake. Right, like that's a good thing. She pressed a trembling hand to her forehead. Her skin was slick with sweat. I always do this, she whispered, voice thick with guilt. I always fucking do this. I should get in trouble, but someone else pays. She wasn't sure if she was talking to Coop or the walls. Tears clouded her eyes again, but she refused to let them fall. The entire room wavered, and her vision became fuzzier and fuzzier. A rustle of movement in the corner of her blurry eyes signaled Coop returning to her side. He crouched low, a battered first aid kit in hand. There's not much, but maybe there's something we can use. His voice sounded hopeful, but the hope sounded a bit forced. She doubted anything in that first aid kit would make a difference against supernatural spider venom. I deserve to die for this. I deserve to fucking expire here, in this shitty lounge for what I did, for never learning. She squeezed Coop's arm, nails digging into his shirt. Her voice came out in a rasping whisper, half delirious. I'm sorry, she said, tears finally spilling. I'm so fucking sorry. His hand covered hers, warm and calloused. Save it, he said quietly, though not unkindly. We can talk about sorry when you're not fading in and out on me. He fished out a roll of bandages. I just have to find something to disinfect this gnarly gash on your shoulder. She tried to laugh, but only managed a strangled choke. Damn it, Coop muttered. He slammed the kit shut. then ran a hand through his sweat-damp hair. "I can't do shit with this." Agitation clipped his words. "I've got to get help. See if there's a doc, or even Joseph and Lydia, though I doubt they'll be worth a damn." He trailed off, scanning her face. "You're going downhill, Ivy, fast. Even if you found somebody to help, I'm not sure we have time," she murmured. "I'm pretty fucked here. I can't just watch you die," Coop shot back, voice raw. She hated seeing that sliver of desperation in his eyes. She clenched her fist on the worn tabletop, ignoring the grime coating its surface. "Maybe that's the only option," she said quietly. "Maybe this is it. This is the cost of everything I've done. The price of fucking up every chance I get." Tears pricked at the back of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Coop scowled, arms crossing his broad chest. "Bullshit." But the curse lacked conviction. He glanced at her, then at the door behind him. She knew he was one decision away from bolting out of here, running to the truck to chase some miracle cure. "Coop," she whispered, "don't go." He froze. The tension in the room hardened. The old mansion creaked in the wind. "Ivy," he said gentler now, "I have to try. And if you fail?" Her words came out sharper than she intended, laced with the bitterness that had corroded her for so long. "If you don't find anyone, you'll come back to find me already cold and dead." "Don't talk like that," he whispered. She saw him wavering, torn between the impulse to fight for her life and the stark reality that maybe they had already lost. Maybe it was the fever, or maybe it was the knowledge that her minutes were ticking away, but a calm kind of clarity washed over her. She looked at him. Really looked at him. 10 years they'd been missing each other. 10 years they'd avoided one another around town, stifling their feelings because she hadn't been able to get her shit together when they were kids. They'd never had a chance to be anything else to each other besides a failed first love. "I don't want to die alone," she confessed quietly. She tried to swallow, but her throat felt like sand. "If I'm about to go, I'd rather be with you." He blinked, expression wavering between anger, sorrow, and denial. "You're not dying," he growled, reopening the first aid kit. She gave a faint, breathless laugh. "You don't know how it feels. I can feel it coming." Coop blinked helplessly as he dabbed her shoulder tenderly with gauze and did his best to wrap the wound in the bandages he had found. "I can't just sit here and watch." "Yes, you can," she cut him off. "If there's nothing we can do, then there's nothing we can do." Her voice faltered, tears threatening to spill. She brushed them away with the back of her hand. "It's been a long time, Coop," she said, voice trembling with both the venom's pain and her longing for him. 10 years and we never hembrights." She stopped, words knotting in her throat. She didn't need to elaborate. They both knew exactly how many times they had come close to crossing that line, only to pull back at the last second. Coop reached out to touch her cheek, and she realized her face was slick with sweat. She probably looked half dead. But that didn't put out the warm glow in Coop's eyes. "Ivy, I know it's ancient history, but I'm sorry I ended things. You just had so much going on, you know? I thought you needed space. I thought just wasn't what you needed." She didn't have time to process this confession. She let out a shaky breath and stroked his thigh. "Well, I don't need space right now. I want to feel alive right now, while I still have time. No one ever knew how to make me feel alive like you." He hesitated, gaze flicking from her face to her shoulder, where the bandage was already soaked through with dark venom-tinged blood. She bit her lip, worry creeping in that maybe she'd just confessed too much. Maybe C seemed like a dying cat or some shit, begging for scraps of affection. But then he spoke, voice low. "Are you sure?" She nodded, tears brimming again. "Yeah," she whispered. "Please." Coop leaned in, She met him halfway, her lips hungry against his. The kiss was rough, edged with 10 years of longing, and it tasted of salt, sweat, and wasted time. She couldn't stop the tremor that ran through her body, partly from the venom, partly from the sheer flood of emotion that hit her like a tsunami. But his hands steadied her, cupping her face as though she were fragile and precious, even in her battered, bloody, hazy state. There wasn't a grand moment of romance. There weren't any declarations or tender preludes. It was messy and desperate. Her fingers tangled in his hair. She let out a soft moan. The bitterness, the heartbreak, and tragedy spiraled in her body, and her longing grew into violent need. Maybe it was the only chance they'd ever have. She might not be breathing in an hour. She clung to him fiercely, as if letting go of him was certain death. He scooped her up from the chair. She stifled a cry when pain lanced her leg, but she tried to ignore it, focusing instead on the warmth of his arms. He carried her to one of the quarter's bedrooms and placed her down on the bed. The frame rattled as he lowered her body, the old mattress letting out a dusty sigh. Their hands fumbled as they stripped off their clothes, urgent and clumsy. She hissed with each tug on her shoulder wound, and he kept whispering, "Sorry," against her skin, to which she had to keep shaking her head to encourage him. Each movement was edged with sorrow and desperation, but also the relief of finally getting what